Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Adobo and Avocados. My name is Marie Cruz, and today I have two amazing people with me. So I'll start with my usual sidekick. Always get that mistake.
Hi, I'm Nicole van der Hoeven. I am currently in Porto, Portugal. And down there is someone I've been looking forward to doing this with because
Yeah.
I first met her. I mean, obviously I've known of her work for years, but I think we only met last month in
hmm
Agile testing days. Would you like to introduce yourself, special
Well,
guest?
I'm Lisa Crispin, and I was sad I didn't get to talk to you more at Agile Testing. I kept seeing y'all kind of in the distance, but there were so many people. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I'm a tester for the last 30 years or so, programmer before that, and I now currently a testing consultant and doing training and things like that. Self a freelance consultant, I guess I should say, with a lot of free time to spend with my donkeys and dogs and cats and husband here in Vermont. So
Mm.
I'm thrilled to be on your I don't know, you call it a file. It's a video. It's a podcast. I'm
Podcast
not sure
slash
what to
live
call it.
Yes to
stream.
all
Yeah.
those things.
But
Yeah.
because you always have such amazing guests, and I felt quite honored to be invited to join you.
Aw. Well, we're just very thrilled to have you, because you're someone that I really know from the work, even before way before that I've become active in the community. I have your books, and then it's
Oh,
just great that now we're finally having this episode with you. But Lisa, so one thing that we always ask our guests before we start off is, so the title of our stream is Adobo and Avocados. So adobo because Nicole and I are from the Philippines, and adobo is the national unofficial national dish of the Philippines. And adobo is basically like it could be pork, it could be chicken, it could be like vegetables, it could be anything, but it's also like a form of cooking where you marinate it with vinegar, with soy sauce, and it's just this really amazing delicacy. And it really reminds us of home. So, what we like to ask our guests is, what is your adobo? So, what is something that reminds you of home? It could be food, or it could also be an activity, a person, or something else, but it's really what reminds you of home.
I love this idea because, food memories and tastes and smells really do make us think of places. But for me, living in Vermont for more than 5 years now, I have to say my adobo is maple syrup. And apologies to my
Oh,
Canadian friends because I know you think you have the
yeah.
market on maple syrup, but Vermont has more maple trees and more maple syrup than any other state in the United States. And
Oh,
Oh, wow. Shots
it's such a thing
fired.
here. Our friends who have farms around us, they make it, we buy it from them, and we put it in everything. It's good in everything. We put it in spaghetti sauce. We put it in pot roast.
mm,
We marinate steaks with it. We, of course, put it on fruit and cereal and in our yogurt and things like that. But
mm.
it's just good on everything. And that was a revelation to me when I moved here because, you know, we used to get syrup that wasn't even real syrup. It was just sugar. Real maple syrup, and
Nice.
it is a taste memory that just goes with you anywhere.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's something that, we need to try, Nicole, if ever we visit Vermont in the future. But so Lisa, you shared with us that you are a tester and you're currently a testing consultant. Outside of that, what do you like to do for fun?
Oh, well, of course, a lot of people know about my donkeys, and I grew up riding horses, but probably 20 years ago, I started getting into donkeys as well, just kind of by accident, and so I love to take my donkeys out, hitch them to a cart or wagon, go driving, or just take them for walks, or just hang out with them in their pen.
Yeah.
And it's really fun just taking care of them, grooming them every day. And they're such personalities and clowns, and they just keep me laughing. But I generally lucky to live in a beautiful rural place and like to take hikes and walks and kayaking in the summer because we're quite close to Lake Champlain. And yeah, those are the things that usually fill my leisure time.
One of my earliest memories of you, Lisa, I think you were doing this webinar, and I think Tristan Lombard was hosting it, and one of your donkeys just came, like,
Oh, wow.
like into your space, and it was like in your background. And like when we like speak about, things that happen like during COVID, it's normally like your pets, like my daughter. And then like I was watching the webinar, and it's your donkey
Yeah,
also appearing.
Marcella came
Yeah,
in the door here.
yeah.
If there wasn't snow on the ground, I could have asked you if you wanted to do that today, but you're not too wild about walking across the snowy ground. So
Yeah, that was a fun memory.
that was pretty
So,
hilarious.
Lisa, you mentioned earlier that you were a developer before you were a tester. How did that happen? Did you always just want to be a developer, and then did you just fall into testing, or how'd that happen?
Well, after graduate school, I had a research job for a couple years. My degree was a master's in business administration, organization development as a specialty, and my undergraduate degree was animal science with a specialty in beef cattle production. And I and the agency I work for got disbanded, and I got laid off, and I just needed a job. And because I'd been working for the government, and then we were in a recession at the time, businesses would say, well, you don't have any real business experience. Like, how is experience different in a business or the government? You're still doing work. But I was having trouble getting a job, and I wanted to move to Austin, Texas. I was in a different part of Texas, and I walked into the University of Texas employment office, and there was a big sign that said, uh, programmer trainees wanted, no experience necessary. And I mean, I had barely, I mean, I went to college in the area of punch cards. I did not do too much with computers in college. And I was like, well, okay. So I went and that right then, and they gave me an aptitude test, and they were so different there in the data processing division at the University of Texas because they could teach anybody to code. We know that it's not that hard to learn. What they wanted was domain knowledge. And so that at that time they needed people with a business background or some knowledge of finance, accounting, those kind of things to work on those apps for the university. So they wanted to hire the knowledge. And so they hired me on the spot. It was awesome. Like MBAs, yeah, we need some. And it was a great training program. It couldn't have been better. It was just a wonderful, we would call it Agile now, very collaborative. The previous cohort of trainees trained the new cohort, which is always the best way. And yeah, that just got me into it. And I at first I thought, well, I'll just do this till I find something else I like. But it turned out I really liked it. And then I got into testing some years later when I was working for a software company in tech support. And this is a long time ago. We didn't even have fax machines. So we had customers calling us on the phone saying, you just sent out this new release. How could you not have seen this great big bug? My database is down, or, something horrendous. And it was just, we're just like, oh, this is terrible. And so we asked the developers. We were in Denver. The developers were mostly back in Germany, and said, could you maybe like send us the tapes maybe like a week before you send them out to the customers, so we can at least try it out. So then we could at least say to the customers, oh, don't worry, we're working on a patch. We'll have that out to you soon. And we just did that as worker bees, and our managers were like, huh, testing. Nobody had
Is
considered
that a
testing up
thing?
to that point. This is back in the 80s. And I mean, other people were testing. We just hadn't heard of it because we had not gone to any kind of computer science school or anything. And yeah, so that's how and they said, okay, well, we're going to form a group to do testing and manage the releases and everything. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And I found I really loved it more than I loved
Wow.
coding. I mean, of course, I still coded. I did
Hmm.
test automation and things like that. But yeah.
That's so interesting. And I wish that there were more opportunities like that still, where they just say, no experience necessary. I think a lot of people get turned off by it because they think that you do need like a computer science degree.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I'm an economics major myself,
Yeah, both
so
of you. I listened to your origin stories on one of your
oh
shows, and but you
Yeah.
both
yeah.
came kind of untraditional ways, or shall we say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I feel like it shouldn't be, it should be more normal for that to
Mhm.
happen. Because I don't think that the skills you need as a tester or as a developer for that matter are that wildly different and unique for the industry. I think
Yeah.
if people had if companies had more of the approach that you describe where it's just like you have the aptitude and the interest, then
Mhm.
we could teach you. Maybe
I
we
don't.
would get a
Yeah,
more diverse working culture.
I don't know if you saw Tamara Yostin's talk at Agile Testing Days. It was a part of the virtual conference.
I did
But
not
she's also
know.
she calls it a career changer. She came into testing from another
Mm.
career, and
Mhm.
it's a wonderful talk. She talks about a fairy tale, and she has these beautiful visuals of unicorns
Oh.
and castles. But she talks about her struggle. It's like, wow, it's really hard, to learn
Yeah.
Python on your own when you
Yeah.
never knew coding before and stuff. But she talked about how she built relationships, and the things she pointed out that I think are so true. When you hire people from outside, you get a totally fresh perspective, which is so important because we're just like in our ruts of cognitive bias, and and you get somebody who's really energetic and wants to learn, and they will learn. When I was hiring testers myself, I always just look for attitude and mindset.
Mhm. Yeah.
The technical skills you can teach anybody, but the thinking skills are harder to teach.
Yeah, and I was actually talking about this with my good friend Rafaela. So we met up for dinner. So she's currently creating her startup company focused around Web3 developers, like helping them with gaining experience, gaining certifications. And one part of the program that they have is because there's this sort of general problem that a lot of employers will look for number of experience as a minimum requirement, but what if you don't have that number of experience? So
Hmm.
what they're gonna offer is, okay, maybe they can help them create like sample projects, and then if an employer sees that, oh, then this person's project is quite similar to the tech stack that we're using, then that could be a good alternative. Because I think nowadays there's a lot of different ways, but maybe a lot of companies are still sort of, but what about the number of years of experience? Which shouldn't be the case, because, like you said, it should be all about the attitude to learning.
Well, and do you experience this that a lot of managers out there, even development managers, they don't really understand testing, and so they're afraid to hire somebody who doesn't have some kind of
Mm,
certification, or they can't be criticized by hiring somebody who has some kind of certification in testing because, well, they had the certificate. uh, I don't know
yeah.
if you see that happening at all.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially since my background is in performance testing, it is sometimes seen as like this dark art, and people don't really know what certification can you take specifically for performance testing, but people want to hang their hat on something solid.
Hmm.
But the
Hmm.
reality is that sometimes it's not about that, and in that case, I think it is more reasonable to hire based on things that you can't teach. I mean, obviously, depending on the position. But one thing that I would add, in addition to what you've said already, is the ability and the drive, the passion for learning. Because I know you talk a lot about continuous learning, but if someone can demonstrate to me that they really love something, whatever it is, it hardly matters what it is, then I will feel more comfortable that they're a person that are going to grow. And in fact, that might even be better than someone who is just like, I did 4 years of university and I haven't learned anything since. I will learn if you sit me down and spoon feed me something. But how often does that happen in real
Hmm.
life? In a real project, you have to figure stuff out. You have to have that drive within yourself because nobody's going to spoon feed it to you.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
Yeah. So Lisa, you've been in the testing industry. Like you're one of the well-respected voices out there, and you and Janet Gregory have also founded the Agile Testing Fellowship. To those who don't know what Agile Testing Fellowship is, can you just let everyone know what it is, what does it offer, and how can it help people in terms of their software testing learning?
Well, thanks for asking me about that. That's a training company that Janet and I started with Jose Diaz, I think 5, 6 years ago. I've kind of lost track. And we'd written two of our books by then, and actually, I think it was Jose's idea. He's like, "There's so much good information in here, but people aren't able to get that through a training course anywhere. What if you did a training course based on the books?" And we found that, guess what? Developing a training course is pretty much as hard as writing a book. um, but we went to it and tried to make a really good hands-on practical course, and with materials that we could find instructors and training providers around the world that we could trust, that people who were software practitioners themselves and had good stories to tell, because we learn through stories as well, and just be able to spread this approach to whole team responsibility for testing and quality around the world, around the whole community. And at the time, there are a lot of training providers who have certifications, which we've talked about a bit. And Janet and I are not fans of certification. We don't think that you can take a multiple choice test and that would show you'll be good at your job, whatever your job is. So, but we understand that a lot of people can't get a job without a certification. And so we called it the Agile Testing Fellowship because our idea is you take the course, and then if you want to, you can join the fellowship, and it's an online community where you get continued support from Janet and me and all of our instructors and training providers and other people who've taken the courses. And we do have a multiple choice test, but the test is designed to help you learn more. So there aren't any trick questions. And if you get any questions wrong, you'll get an email explaining why your answer was wrong. It won't tell you the right answer, but it'll tell you why your answer was wrong. So we just wanted to make it kind of an additional reinforce the learning. And it's also open to anybody. I mean, if you've read our books, you could, or just have experience working in agile teams, you'd probably pass the test just fine. And then you join our Slack workspace and get access to, help with problems or just sharing things. But yeah, it's just mainly to have a mechanism to train other people to teach our courses. And now we have two courses. So we have holistic testing strategies for agile teams, which is just the basics, more focused on the left side of our holistic testing model, uh, the planning and building stages of software. And then the holistic testing for continuous delivery, which is a little more focused on the right side of the holistic testing model of the testing activities that happen after you deploy to test environments, after you deploy to production. What do you learn from production? And what do you learn that feeds into the next changes that you do? So between the two courses, we get all the way around the model. And because we see testing as something that happens at every stage of building a piece of software.
So
Yeah.
I have to ask, it just seems like you're doing so much. You do consulting, you do training, you have this agile testing fellowship, which is part training, certification, but also sounds like mentorship. You write, you've written, you said 5 books, and you also do write a lot of blog posts. You speak. You're very active in the community. How in the world do you get all of this done?
I don't know. I mean, I have more free time now because I don't have a 40-hour a week full-time job since I guess I quit in year before last. But yeah, I don't know. I look back and think, how in the world did I do that? And play with the donkeys and do other things. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of it is because the practice of writing and speaking. If you want to learn something, propose writing an article about it or propose doing a workshop about it at a conference, because then you're going to have to learn it so you can teach it. So I think a lot of that has really helped learning wise. And then, when I go to a conference, the reason I started speaking was I didn't work for a company that would send me to conferences. But if I spoke at a conference, I could get to the conference for free. So I started speaking and volunteering at conferences, and then taking these ideas back to my team to try. And I think it just help my team work better. And so then that sort of freed me up mentally to have more time outside of work to pursue some of these other things. But it was just the desire, back in 2000 when I joined my first extreme programming team, which I was very keen to do after reading Kent Beck's Extreme Programming Explained book. Nobody knew what testers should do on extreme programming teams. And you read the books at the time, they were all about testing and quality, but there was nothing about anybody on the team being called a tester or quality engineer or any of that. And but I really knew that we needed to be there and contribute, and sort of elbowed my way in. And so I started looking for people who were doing it, and I found Janet. And we just figured if we share our experiences, a lot of teams are having the same problems. So if we found a way to work around the problem, let's share that with somebody else, because there are going to be other problems to solve. And so our goal was try to share what we learned, and what we started meeting people at conferences and talking to them. What did they learn? And let's put these in a book that can help other people get kind of a grounding. It's like, okay, we know this much. Now we can start going to the new frontiers after that. So it just seems so important to do it.
Yeah. I
Nobody else
think
was doing it at the time. So
yeah, I think that's also one of the reasons why, for example, Nicole and I have started this podcast slash live stream. We should just call it podcast or what, live stream. I always have to say that. But anyway, yeah, because like we noticed that, yeah, like there's quite a few like channels out there, but it's always about the technical side of things, and there's less channels about the human side of things, and what like other skills you actually need to have a career in tech. And so we wanted to fill that gap, and I think that's what you've also tried to do, because you saw that, yeah, experience the same problem. Maybe other companies are also experiencing the same problems, but then no one's talking about it, so let's go and write the book or talk about it. One of my struggles though is, there are tons of things that I do want to share, that I do want to do, but it's just like prioritizing which one. Because um, before, like during the pandemic, I think I could handle it like much better. But like nowadays, it's a bit difficult to like start something new without finishing something else first. But at the same time, you're like, oh, I really want to start this. So
mhm.
from your perspective, like, has that ever happened? Like, you're doing a, I don't know, specific project or a blog, and then you have an idea, and you're like, oh my gosh, I need to, I need to do something about that idea. Like, how do you manage all that?
I'm really bad about that, that multitasking, and it's hard to stay focused. And I've just been really lucky. One thing is I learned very early on with my early agile teams is it's really important to focus on finishing things.
Yeah.
So if we're doing an iteration and we're going to do 5 stories, we got to all focus on finishing that first top priority story. We can't all work on it at the same time, but maybe as we're getting close to finishing, oh, we need to do some load testing, or oh, we need to make some database changes. Well, the rest of the team can stop what they're doing and pitch in and get that story finished. Then, because we only know how much work we've done, we don't know how much work there is left to do. We can only guess. So that's something I just kind of learned through work, is try to stay focused on finishing, and then having a pairing. I've always had
Mhm.
Janet to write with. I mean, I do blogging and things on my own as well, but all the big things we've done, we did together. And so we have complementary strengths. Janet's incredibly organized, and she's good at staying focused on task. So if I started to veer off and, oh, I want to go do this other thing, then Lisa. And I mean, when we wrote our books and did our courses, we actually did have a very detailed, just like a software project, release plan. here are all our sort of our stories. Here are our chapters. Here's what we're going to write. We're going to do two every 2 weeks, and we'll be done with our first draft by this point. We'll get our feedback. I wouldn't have done that kind of organization on my own. So I think
Mm.
building those relationships with people who have skills that you lack can fill in the gaps, and have somebody, kind of accountability buddy at the very
Yeah.
least, to say, oh, I said I would do this, but I'm going to have to tell this person in a week, did I do it or not? It's going to motivate me
Yeah.
to get it done. So I think that's really important. I've floundered more not working full time because it's been harder to find people to fill that role for me. I'm so used to pairing and working in an ensemble, and I really suck at working on my own.
See, this is really dangerous because as I'm listening to you, I'm like, "Hey, Marie, let's do
I
something." Is that what you were thinking too?
Yeah, well, I think we haven't, for example, like shared it as part of this episode, but like I'm writing a book and like I said to Nicole, hey, why don't we also write a book? But it's like I still have to finish the book that I'm writing, but at
Yeah,
the same time, the book idea that I have with Nicole, it's also great, and I want to get started with that, and I
yeah.
just have to like, okay, just take a pause and just focus on, you still have the other book that you still haven't finished. Focus on that first, and then Nicole's not going anywhere, so she'll still be
Yeah, and
there.
also Nicole said yes to that, despite the
Yeah, that
fact
is
that
the
she
problem.
also very publicly announced she was writing a book in another field
Yeah.
and still has to do that before doing this thing. And in the meantime, Marie and I are like, hey, while we're waiting, as if, because we have so much time, let's start this live stream series.
There you go. Why
I mean,
not?
there's always things to do though. Like
Yeah.
how do you just I don't know, is this something I'm searching for like some golden nugget or tell
I mean,
us what you've learned.
I would say one thing is, people do want to help. So when we wrote our books, like our second big book, more agile testing,
Mm,
we asked 40 different people to write sidebars because such a
mm,
range of different types of testing we were covering. And Janet and I, guess what? We're not experts at embedded testing. We're not experts at mobile
Mm.
testing, et cetera. So, but we know a lot of people. And you know
Yeah.
what? People want to help. And so we asked 40 different people to write sidebars in their tell a story in their specialty, whatever it was. And like, somebody, oh, we know so and so does embedded testing. Let's
Oh,
ask
that's a
her
good
to
idea.
do a sidebar. We ended up
yeah.
with 70 sidebars from these 40 people.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay.
big that's not only a big chunk of the book, that's we get the most feedback on people like the sidebars the best. Both of
Hmm.
those two books. And the third book we did, which we tried to write a short book, only 100 pages, our last chapter is all stories from somebody else. So getting help, people want to help, and people love being in a book. And
Mhm.
just like Janet finally wrote a book with somebody else, so she's written two books now with Selena
Mm.
Delisi on their quality practices assessment model.
Mhm.
And I had free time, and I said, how can I help you? And
Yeah.
so they had me do a lot of reviewing of the book. I did some copy editing for them because after all my years of working with good copy editors, I've learned some of that skill.
That's
I would
a
still
good
hire a
idea.
good copy editor myself, but I put in a lot of time helping them. It was helping me because I use their quality practices assessment model in my consulting, and you know all they had to do was well, I volunteer, but I mean, I'm just saying, a lot of times you just ask for help and people are really happy to help you. So that's
Mm.
it takes a village to do these things. So get help.
Yeah. Nicole, we need to speak on
Yeah, yeah.
this.
I'll help you. I've got some free time. Let me know.
Aw, thank
Yeah.
you. That's so nice.
Oh.
We
Well,
definitely will do that.
yeah. I think before I ask, because like the title of today's episode is about the DevOps culture from a tester's mindset, there is one question that I do want to ask, and um, because like to some people, yeah, like you're seen as this great leader in the testing community space.
I
Um,
mean, you are.
yeah. But how does that make you feel? So does it trigger any imposter syndrome or any sort of like feelingness of, am I really? Or you're like, yes, I am, because I've done all these amazing contributions. And yeah, I'm just curious to know how is it like from your side.
Well, my whole life I've suffered from very low self-esteem, so it's always a struggle. And yeah, my imposter syndrome looms large and often wins. But it's more people watching people like you that triggers my imposter syndrome. It's like, wow, that webinar Marie just did was great, or oh, what Nicole's talk, oh, and I see that and it's like, I don't know how to do that. Oh, I just feel like I can't do anything. So that's
Oh,
really what gets to me is seeing people. It's like, oh, I wish I knew what they did. But it is, I mean, I'm starting to get better, I try to talk to other practitioners my age or around my age, and they say, "Lisa, you can be the wise woman now." And I sometimes mistaken for Linda Rising, who's my personal hero. And like that makes me feel really good.
yeah.
That people might think I'm Linda. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's been a lifelong struggle for me and a career long struggle for me. The imposter syndrome is really, really hard. But I'm really glad that so many people talk about it now, and I get help. Like I love Jim Hill's self care backpack. Get to Cliffguard's talks on it have been so helpful. Um,
Yeah.
Sophie Kuster's talks are great. And then I did a workshop, two workshops last year with Veerle Verhagen, also from the Netherlands, on imposter syndrome, where we asked people in the workshop to come up with ideas of how do we beat this,
Yeah.
how do we make a world where this cannot happen, and so all those things have given me really good ideas to help me cope with it.
Yeah. I think it's really that, like, we just need to talk about it more, cuz I don't think I've heard about imposter syndrome like when I was starting. Like it's not really something that people talk about. Um but hey, we got a comment here
Oh,
from
Fernando, that's so
Fernando
nice.
Kobayashi. If Lisa suffers from imposter syndrome, I feel like I got up my game to be able to avoid that.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's so nice.
Yeah, but I think that's it. We all suffer from it. It's not something that's gonna go away. We just need to learn how to deal with that. Yeah.
There was
I
actually
like
somebody in our workshop at Agile Testing Days last year he's like, I didn't know what this was. I don't suffer from it. And now I realize, because I'm a manager,
Mm,
probably people on my team are suffering from this, and
mm,
I have no empathy for him at all. So
yeah,
there are people who don't suffer from it, but it was very interesting to hear that it was really valuable for him to learn about it.
yeah.
I think my approach to it and the thing that has worked the most, I mean, it's not foolproof or anything, but I like to reframe whenever I start to feel like I'm not good enough. I like to steer into it and reframe it as learning in public. Like, yeah, I'm not good enough, because if enough is like perfection, nobody really is. But instead of trying to get there, then I'm just going
Mm,
to talk about things as if I'm still learning, rather than, as if I've learned it already and
yeah.
I'm
Oh,
such
I
an
like that.
expert at this.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel, better, both better about talking about things, and also more authentic, because I'm not saying that everyone should do what I'm saying.
Hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
kind of just offering it up as like, hey, here's something that I learned. Is it wrong? I don't know. Let me know. But I just wanted to share that.
Yeah. I think that really helps as well because, for example, from my side, seeing you, Nicole, with the whole learning in public, because I like my background has always been in software testing. And then when I joined Grafana Labs, I was advocating, and I still am advocating about the performance testing, the browser testing. But because Grafana Labs, they also have other products, then one of my objectives as well in the near future is to also learn about it. But then for me to learn about those products, I need to have like a deeper understanding of things that I'm not really comfortable of, because I haven't done any learnings in terms of that. Like it was just this week that I learned what eBPF is, and there's just so much terms that I don't know. And hearing Nicole talk about there are things that she also don't know and that she's just gonna learn it in public also makes me feel, yeah, okay, I can do it. I don't know anything about this product now, but I just need to spend some time learning about it, and then I can talk about it in public, and then just frame it from that perspective that it's just something that I've learned. I'm not an expert about it, but this is my understanding of it. Yeah.
I love that term, learning in public, and it's really true. It really describes it well.
Yeah. So, DevOps culture from a tester's perspective. So, we had like when we had Katya Obring before, we
Hmm.
also talked about the importance of DevOps culture, how that link how is that link to quality engineering? Because nowadays, like there's a lot of, I guess, talks about what DevOps is, but from a tester's perspective, there might still be people who aren't comfortable with understanding what really DevOps is about. So what sort of, I guess, like from your side, Lisa, like how can testers get comfortable with the idea of understanding what DevOps is, what the DevOps culture is about, and how can that help them in terms of being a better software tester as well.
Yeah, I think to understand it better, it's good to go back and see how that term even got coined. So back, I think it was 2009, the first DevOps Day was held in, I believe, in Belgium. And Patrick Dubois coined the term DevOps. And the reason he came up with that was, when I started out in extreme programming and Agile, I was working for small startups. And so we were doing our own ops. So it never even occurred to me that a lot of larger companies, especially big enterprise companies, like, oh, we're going to do an agile transformation. So we're going to have cross functional teams and we'll have all these different specialists on the teams and everybody's going to learn everything. But they just left the operations people alone and they still threw code over the wall. It's okay, ready to release. Here's your release candidate. You operations people, release it and take care of it. And we're going to work on the next feature now. And I just wasn't even personally aware of that because where I was working, we had to do everything. Um, so it was great to get a name for that. And at first I was kind of offended by the name. It's like, well, we're already doing that. And then I realized, well, Lisa, in your own little unicorn land, you're doing it, but there's a big world out there. So, um, I'm this year, one of my new things, because I had free time, is I became a Dora community guide. So Dora is Google's DevOps research and assessment that do the state of DevOps surveys and stuff. And those people have a great fondness for the term DevOps because, for their perspective, it has brought people together. That's the whole idea. And as a tester who's always done operationsy stuff, I was always involved in configuring the continuous integration. I was always involved in doing production releases. I was monitoring and all those things. uh, I think it scares people that haven't had that experience. Like, well, I don't, that's an area somebody else does that, and I'm not going to be even welcomed to try to learn to do that. And so, yeah, my mission has been to try to get testers to be interested in the, for people in the DevOps loop or the holistic testing loop, get interested in the right side of that. Is that your experience? Do you feel like testers embrace it, or do you think they shy away from it because they're just not familiar with the language of it?
I think initially, so when I was working like in the first few projects that I've been part of, it's really like we can clearly see the divide that okay, after we've tested something, that's it. Like we don't even know how it gets into production. We
Mm-hmm.
don't even know how the maintenance stuff happen. As long as we've done our part, that's it. Like we've done our job. But the past like few companies, especially like the last two companies that I've worked for, there's definitely more interest in having that whole team approach and really understanding okay, what happens like to the code that we actually deployed, how is that deployed to production, what, like, do we get any dashboards, do we get any alerting if there's some issues. And I think that's when I've also started to hear the title quality engineers.
Mm-hmm.
That's really when testers are now more seen as we're not just at this stage, but we're also providing value at every stages. So there are companies that are now moving away to that. But I don't know if that is the same with every company still. But I think we are slowly moving to that right direction.
That's
I
good to
think it
hear.
can be
Mhm.
really daunting because we've come up with some of the same concepts, but we express them differently. So,
Yeah.
for example, testers are used to thinking in terms of requirements. Well, ops engineers and platform engineers or SREs have requirements too, but they usually use different terms. They might use thresholds or SLOs, or, those are
Mm-hmm.
different forms of criteria. Basically, we're all talking about criteria for quality, but I think that can be detrimental to someone who is wanting to cross over, because you
Mm.
have to learn another language, another way of thinking. And also, even the concept of the framing of testing as like checking to make sure, and I'm not saying I agree with this, but checking to make sure whether something um, is as expected, and something that is very binary like pass or fail, that doesn't translate as well into the ops world, where things like failure is taken as a given. It's going to fail at some point. It's just a matter of when and how. So
Yeah.
there are these, like, it sounds like they're just semantics, but I
Yeah.
think those nuances are important. And I think that the industry in general is spreading out, is going towards this idea of it doesn't really matter what kind of engineer you are, as long as you are interested in improving the application, the system. I think that there are still those remnants of silos that we have to contend with.
Yeah, and I got very interested in looking more at delivery deployment pipelines and things that involve with continuous integration, and especially observability along with monitoring, thanks to people like Abby Bangser and Ashley Hunsberger a few years ago. Well, Abby and I did a workshop at European Testing Day, or European Testing Conference, I think in 2018, where we it was Abby's idea. Let's have people visualize a deployment pipeline and then talk about different stages and how can we shorten the feedback loops. And it was, people were just like, "Whoa, this is a great exercise." And then Ashley and I built on that to make more of an all-day workshop for conferences, where let's learn the language of DevOps and what is continuous delivery. Let's define some of these things. And it
Yeah.
really helps people, because if you want to go talk to those specialists on your team, you need to speak their language. You need to understand them, each other, and I think that is so important. And I started
Mhm.
a page on my website, where it's just this huge thing now. I just dump all the resources. People say, "Hey, here's a good book," or "Here's a great webinar on whatever observability or continuous delivery," and I just have this page where I've got all these resources listed, because I want people who don't know about it to see there's a
Yeah.
lot of places you can learn about it.
Yeah. I think I also agree that some of these words, they are just defining the same things, but then it it might get out of context depending on like how it's being used. Because like for example, you talked about this holistic testing as one of the like courses that's offered as part of Agile testing fellowship. um how is it different to, let's say, because now we have terms like shift left, we've got shift right, and then we've got the continuous testing. Is holistic testing just the same as continuous testing, or is it a different view or a different mindset when it comes to testing?
Oh, it's a great question. This is a few years back when we started hearing the term shift left. Janet wrote a really great blog post about why that term offended her so much, because
Yeah, I read
it
that. Yeah.
implies that software development is linear. And we
Yeah.
know it is not linear. And the DevOps loop does a great job of representing that. However, when you look at the DevOps, if you look up DevOps loop on Google or wherever, you get this model that actually has a testing stage in it. Like, what?
Mm.
And also, I have tried to find who came up with that DevOps loop, and nobody takes credit for it. Not even Patrick Dubois didn't even know who came up with the actual loop. But Janet looked at that loop, and then she looked at Dan Ashby. He had his really great model taking that DevOps loop and saying, we test here, we test here, we test here, all the way around it. And he called it the continuous testing loop. And we thought that was great. But then, Janet got the idea to expand on that. And it's like, we have to get away from this idea that testing is a stage in the DevOps loop. And she like, what do we call this? And by that time, people, when they say continuous testing nowadays, they mean the automated testing that happens in continuous integration.
Yeah.
They have co-opted that term completely. So we couldn't use that term. And so Agile, unfortunately, our whole brand is Agile testing. Our books, our company. Um, but the word Agile, what does that mean to anybody anymore? Hundreds of different things. And it has negative connotations to a lot of people. And to the point where a lot of times you're more successful if you try to get your organization to do a DevOps transformation rather than an Agile transformation. You achieve the same goals.
Yeah.
You just label it differently. So Janet came up with holistic because it both embraces the idea that the whole team needs to be participating in it, and that it's through the whole life cycle. So
Mhm.
nobody had branded holistic as anything yet, so we took that.
I like that. Yeah, because I wrote this article for D Zone about this continuous testing approach for performance, and I've actually added there that if you Google continuous testing, mostly it's about like the automated tests that are added as part of like the different stages of the pipeline. Like you've got tests that are added as part of your PR pipelines, but then you've got different tests, and it's all about executing them continuously, and that can aid in the whole continuous deployment and hopefully continuous delivery. Sorry, delivery and then deployment. I always get this too confusing. But yeah, it's great that you brought that up, because there are people out there who have that misconception that continuous testing is all about automation, but it's not. So, as part of that article, I've described like what the different performance testing tasks that you can do on every stages, not just as part of like a stage, but it's like all over the like the DevOps cycle. And I think having that term holistic testing really solidifies that, because it's really not one person's responsibility, and like you said, it takes a village as well, like to do all these things. So yeah, it's a good point.
I'm going to look for your article. I haven't seen that one. So.
Ooh, yeah, I'll share it.
And I see what Fernando said in the chat. The testing column. There's always a lot of discussion of should
Ah,
we have a testing
yes.
column,
Yeah.
and but he's pointing out a good point. It's always on the right on people's Jira boards, so that's a
Yeah.
very good point.
Yeah.
and
Katya
and
did. Yeah.
and I think about it now of left and right can be the left side of, or the right side of the holistic testing loop. So
Yeah.
I'm good with it.
I remember, I think Katya did a talk about deleting that test column as part of
Hmm.
ATD, because I think just really having that test column reinforces that it's still someone's responsibility, whereas if you delete that column and you just have, I don't know, I'm gonna simplify it like in progress, done or something, then at least there's no one specific person responsible for doing the testing. It's everyone in the team. So I've seen teams where they've deleted the test column, and yeah, the developers have started testing, which which is great. But there are still teams who still want some form of better structure, and they've left the testing column, but the developers are also doing the test. So I think
Hmm.
it's all about what works for your team. Too, I think that plays a big part.
Absolutely.
I am also interested, since we're talking about like bringing DevOps to testers and kind of breaking down those silos. I am also interested in coming up with some sort of term that describes what I do without having me define myself in terms of tester, developer, SRE. Like, I feel like we should come up with something that transcends those labels. And that way it's kind of like when it's kind of like the having of the test column. Sometimes labels are prohibitive, they're
Mhm.
prescriptive, they tell you what you need to do, and that's when it's not so great because it is a limitation. But sometimes when it's descriptive, that can be really powerful because it empowers you to do something that maybe you were already naturally inclined to do. And I feel like now describing myself as a tester doesn't adequately represent what I like to
Mhm.
do. And it's more, I want to, I have like an investigative mind. I want to figure out how something breaks and the causes for that, and also be around to fix it. And that usually leads me through many different activities. And I don't really want to be just pigeonholed as a tester. But that term doesn't really exist except to say, yeah, quality engineer. But I feel like quality is such a, it's so vague. It's, I struggle to really attach it to something meaty and concrete.
Yeah, that is a good point because we labels can be so destructive, but then we're humans and we seem to need them. So getting ones that make sense. I know you've had Jenna Charlton on the video
Yes, we have.
Yeah.
blog or video podcast, and I know she's doing a lot of research in you know what people call themselves
Identities.
or their
Yeah.
job
Yeah,
titles or
stuff
things like
like that.
that. And, it'd be interesting to see what she comes up with. But yeah, I've always called myself a tester and been happy with that. But I mean, I've had other titles. Um, but I get what you're saying. I could get away with that because I was really lucky to be on teams that at least wanted to be high performing teams and had a really healthy culture and a healthy attitude to it, and I was included. But we don't always come into those situations. Like a lot of times we come into a situation where, unfortunately, back I'm sure it still happens, but 20 years ago, if people heard the word tester, they saw somebody sitting in a cubicle manually going through regression checklists, which can be automated, of course, and should be. But that was the idea a lot of people had in their head of this is a tester. So how are they going to do anything else that's useful? They're just doing monkey work, and so there's a lot of baggage with a lot of these terms. And QA, quality assurance person, it's like we can't assure quality as individuals on a team. So what does that mean? I like what Pete Whalen, he used to have a business card said question asker, which is
Mm.
a good representation for those letters. But yeah, I don't know. If y'all have great ideas for a good term, I would love
Yeah.
to hear it.
Yeah, because I also resonate with that. Like, I identify as a tester, but then, like, when I did this talk about intersectionality in tech, I think I've mentioned that when people like because my job title is developer advocate, but just that word developer, I feel like I don't really see myself as a developer. But then I can write code, I can write automated tests. So really that should make me a developer, but there's still this sort of feeling like, but I don't really write production code.
Well,
but
yeah, I'll tell you
but
though,
yeah.
I my first Scrum team back in the early aughts, I worked for Mike Cohn, who is quite a leader in Scrum, but he was our boss, and he said a developer is anybody involved in developing software. I don't care what your specialty is.
Mm-hmm.
You may not even be in a technical role. You're still a developer,
I
and
like that. Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. And I think this is gonna tie in nicely with our episode next week. So without spoiling too much, I think we need to we need to briefly touch about this as well. But it brings a good point, like especially with like the different job titles. I think testing is like one of those industry which really has a lot of job titles. Like you could be uh I don't know, SDET, automation tester, QA automation engineer, test analyst. Whereas on the development side, it's like, okay, you've got developer, senior developer, principal developer. But in software testing, we have a lot of different roles. So yeah, I wonder who's gonna come up with this new title that really transcends every every single thing that we are trying to do.
I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
that.
Maybe Nicole, you should, yeah, think of it, coin a term for yeah, for the future.
Well, right now I just have questions, and it's like one of my questions is, why are testing and observability often pitted against each other
Mm-hmm.
when really they're trying to do the same thing?
Mhm.
And I think it's because they're talking those terms, testing and observing, those are activities. They're not the thing that we want. They're different ways to get to the same thing. So I feel like observing and observability can seem too passive for testers. It gives the connotation that you're just looking, and of
Ah,
course that's not what it is, but
Yeah.
words matter.
that's
and
a good point too. Yeah.
and I was thinking that maybe if we talked about it more in terms of reliability, testers would be like, "Oh, I know what reliability testing is. That's the thing that we're trying to get to. That is the goal." Whereas observability in itself, it's an adjective, it's a descriptor for a system, but it is not the goal in itself. It's a means to a goal. So
Yeah.
there are those sorts of disconnects with the language that we use. I think if we just, I don't know, maybe I'm being too idealistic, but if we could just get on the same page about it, maybe we could come up with something that everybody feels represents them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Is was at a Dora guide meeting this week where there's a Dora core model which tries to summarize the data from several years of the state of DevOps survey of what does allow teams to perform well and create good software products. And they're same kind of thing, just in this model with these different little bubbles and calling things different, like shift left on security. Well, what does that really mean? And everybody's struggling with these language. And I would really like for more testers to get involved with Dora,
Mhm.
because I think, Nicole, you give a great example of a perspective that people who don't come from the testing side of things are not going to even think of that perspective,
Yeah.
and it's so
It's the
important.
same. It's the same with because I remember you posted a tweet about like with the quality attributes, and like
Mm,
that should really be the term instead of like, okay, functional versus non-functional requirements.
I
hmm
Because
hate
like
non-functional so much, so
yeah,
much.
because like you said, someone who doesn't really have that too much context about what non-functional requirements are, then they treat that as not so important or things that we should do after the
hmm
functional requirements have been deployed. But it should really be included as early as possible. And I think as an industry, we've been paying for that because until now we're seeing accessibility or performance push right at the end after we have deployed the application to production.
I mean,
So
I was guilty. My teams in the early aughts were guilty of going along. I would say 6 years for me before I realized we're not we're not doing any performance testing. We're not doing any security testing. We hadn't even heard of accessibility testing, and it was just
yeah.
a big wake up call. When you're a little startup back then, you could get away with that stuff. But it's
Yeah.
like, well, there's a lot more to this product from a customer perspective than how functional it is. So, ugh, it's embarrassing
Yeah.
to look back.
Yeah, I was the same. Like when I first started, like I didn't do accessibility testing, no performance testing. But especially now, like we are seeing that, yeah, those are also important. There's another comment from Fernando. At some places, it feels like DevOps is just a different title for the infrastructure team slash silo.
I see that a lot. Yeah, it's a real anti pattern, but it happens.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, we are. I can't believe this has been almost 1 hour. I feel like we can discuss more about certain topics. And yeah, yes, Nicole, we're gonna wait for that term that you're gonna coin. But one last question, Lisa. So what's one piece of advice that you would give, to women or to anyone out there who want to have a career in tech?
Build relationships.
Mm.
It's all about asking for help, being brave enough to ask for help, building relationships, getting a sponsor, somebody who can really help you to promote your career. I learned even in recent years, whenever I started a new job, I learned that the first thing I need to do, and I am a shy person. I know I have this persona, a public persona, where I may not seem that way, but I'm very shy. And I realized I have to reach out to people, not just on my team, but on other teams and other parts of the organization, and make friends with them. And you know what? It's really surprising to me as I'll ask, you're the manager of the platform team. Do you think you would spend 30 minutes talking to me next week?
Mm.
Sure. And pretty soon it turns into, oh, let's just do this every week or every couple of weeks. And I do that with people on different roles, different teams. And then when I have a problem, like, oh, we're going to change our deployment tool to something else. I wonder what risks there are in that. Oh, guess what? I know the platform team manager, and I bet that person knows. So, building those relationships, I think, is really important. Katrina Clokey has a great book, of Practical Guide to Testing and DevOps, available on LeanPub. And a lot of that book is devoted to relationships, the importance of relationships, how to build those relationships. And that's one of the things that inspired me. I mean, that book's been out a while now. Um, I we all need help. We all need support. Don't go out there alone. It's dangerous. You need friends.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for sharing a lot of your wisdom with us today. But yeah, hopefully everyone who's watching or who's gonna watch this episode will also learn a lot about DevOps culture, a lot about building relationships, and yeah, just how awesome Lisa is. So thank you so much again, Lisa, for being with us today.
Oh, this has
Yes,
been
thank
really
you.
fun. I wish we could sit down and do this every
Oh,
week. Just
Oh,
chat with you.
yeah.
you're
Oh,
giving us ideas, Lisa. it's
yes.
it's
Adding
dangerous.
adding one more thing to your to-do list. No, I don't think we
Yeah.
should do
Yeah.
that.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, we'll be back again next week for
Oh,
another episode.
can't wait. I'll keep
Thank
watching.
you. All right. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye
Thanks,
bye.
everyone.
You.
Bye.